It's Saturday, 7th of January, and you're tuned into the Portable Power Podcast. Each Saturday, we're going to be taking 5 Game Boy games in the order they were released, from the humble beginnings of 1989, and living the evolution of Nintendo's wonderful handheld consoles. This week, we're playing Baseball, Alleyway, Super Mario Land, Yakuman, and Tennis. Let's start the show. Baseball, DMG-BS, developed by Intelligent Systems and published by Nintendo. You could be forgiven for thinking that for any new system, the chosen launch titles should be solid, tested to a fault, showcasing what the new technology is all about. They can be primitive and simple, as long as they're fun. And yet, we have Baseball. This was a launch title in all regions. Now, in North America and Japan, this makes sense, but as a European, I'm not sure why they even bothered releasing this game at all over here. Rounders is a game that kids play in school, and it wasn't until 1990 that we got a soccer game. Leaving all that aside, this game is not the best way to experience the sport for the first time, or at all. Starting the single-player game gives you a grand total of 2 options, USA mode or Japan mode. The only difference being the generic names given to your players. USA mode allows you to choose a team led by Mario or Luigi, despite the fact that they're Italian characters designed by Japanese game developers. The sprites don't even look like those guys, even though it's clearly Mario pitching on the cover art. The close-up sprites we get are alright, although it would be nice to see the game from the pitcher's perspective when you're not batting. You can alter your throws with curve, but I don't think it makes a difference. Laziness is all over this one. When you're taken to the overhead field view, it looks like something from the Atari 2600. I know the Game Boy was low res, but it was capable of a lot more than this. The AI here will destroy you, fielding and batting. I don't think it's possible to beat this game. At least, I don't want to try. Your fielders move like they're playing on the moon. The slowdown is ridiculous, but this doesn't help you catch the ball at all. You just get longer to watch your fielders get nowhere near it. Also, you can't always automatically move the closest player, but some off-screen character that you need to guess the location of. Or even sometimes 2 or 3 players. Or none. Occasionally they'll just get stuck on the boundary for some reason. This game is an absolute mess, which brings me back to my initial point. Was this game tested at all? I find it hard to comprehend why Nintendo would choose to kick off their handheld with this. The best thing about Baseball is the animation you get when you get trounced, which you will. Your assorted failures line up apologetically for their fans, who proceed to lob their garbage, hitting the guy at the end with more accuracy than your fielders can manage. We can only hope that they were throwing copies of this cartridge. Alleyway, DMG-AW, developed by Intelligent Systems and published by Nintendo. One of the most imitated styles of video game of the time was the bat and ball break-em-ups popularized by titles such as Breakout and Arkanoid, so it was inevitable there'd be one on the Game Boy. And it's a format that certainly works on the little handheld. Alleyway gives you 24 stages, which is alright in itself. However, they repeat themselves in 8 groups of 3. The first one in a trio is a standard block-breaking level, but this is always followed by a side-scrolling variant of the same board. The third is the same again, but this time the level descends towards you. In a game where there's not a great deal going on to begin with, this repetitiveness will probably bore you to tears before you can get through all 8 layouts. If you manage to get through all of them, you can loop the game, although there's really no reason to. Plus, there's no music in the game, except for the bonus levels, so it doesn't even have that to stimulate you. The sounds you get change depending on which colour block the ball hits, but they're still forgettable. You have a reasonable amount of control over your paddle, being able to move faster or slower than normal by pressing A or B. The ball only moves in 15, 30 or 45 degree angles though. There is some speed up when you hit the darker blocks, but it never gets crazy enough. Later on, if you hit the top of the board, your paddle shrinks. But even so, the game is not much of a challenge. Your main obstacle will be holding your concentration for long enough. I don't see how this game brings anything new to the table. There are no power-ups like multi-balls or through-balls to be had, something that even its predecessors featured. Alleyway is one of those games, really. What's there is pretty good, it's just that there's not enough there.
Are coming! Yes, and Mario is your only hope. Team up with him in Super Mario Land. Guide him on the Nintendo Game Boy. Challenge the mysteries and terrors of ancient Egypt. Battle all the horrors of the deep. Master lots of weird worlds to give Mario a happy ending and make your world a better place. Super Mario Land and other exciting games for Game Boy. Nintendo. Now you're playing with power. Portable power.
Super Mario Land, DMG-ML, developed and published by Nintendo. Now this is more like it. The launch title that is perhaps most fondly remembered is the indomitable little plumber's first outing on the Game Boy. Super Mario Land is such a mainstay of video game history, and deservedly so. Mario was already firmly established in the original Super Mario Bros. Games on the NES, and was always going to be the flag bearer for a new Nintendo console. Super Mario Land sold more than 18 million copies, more than Mario 3 on the NES, and played a huge part in the early success of the system. However, the graphics are more akin to the first Super Mario Bros. Game than number 3. It can't be ignored that the look of this game is incredibly Spartan. Perhaps this was Nintendo playing it safe at such an early age. Mario is only 12 pixels high, and several enemies are equally lacking in detail. This was a strange decision, especially considering that there's not a whole lot going on in the backgrounds either. In the realm of strange decisions, this game went against the Mario canon sometimes. Mario's father and creator Shigeru Miyamoto took a somewhat hands-off approach to Mario's first portable adventure, leaving many creative decisions to the unadulterated genius of Game Boy inventor Gunpei Yokoi. This game isn't set in the Mushroom Kingdom, but some alternate universe called Sarasaland, an odd place where fireballs fly diagonally, Koopas explode, and one-up mushrooms are replaced by hearts. It's not Princess Peach you're saving. Here the hapless, distressed damsel is one Princess Daisy. Yes, it's that Mario game. Ultimately, though, this is the same game you've played before. The storyline is not the thing to focus on, rather, what this game achieved. The controls are tight and responsive, if a little slippery at times. It may seem that the controls are nothing to remark on, but they set a certain benchmark for future platformers on the Game Boy. The perfect A to jump, B to fire setup in the 2-button format cannot be improved upon, despite the efforts of some development companies insisting it should be the other way round. This is how you program platformers. It's instinctive and so ingrained in players' reflexes that any other combination just doesn't work. Sorry, Ocean and LJN, but you're not winning that argument. Aside from the traditional levels, there are a pair of side-scrolling shooter stages which actually play really well, with some particularly excellent music adding to the more frenetic pace. The entire soundtrack really is a masterpiece. It's not a long game, but the compositions that accompany it are delightful, burrowing into your subconscious for hours after turning the game off. And that ending theme, oh wow. Sadly, Super Mario Land can't be awarded a perfect score. The graphics let it down too much. It's understandable why these design choices were made. Yokoi and his team were working with a brand new medium, and it would have been all too possible to overwhelm the prospective audience with too many visuals. Even so, it's just too sparse, which, when coupled with the dot matrix blur, could have put players off. The gameplay, while excellent in so many ways, doesn't get a 10 out of 10 either because the game's just too short and too easy. The same justifications could potentially apply to this too, and there is a hard mode unlocked if you fancy looping the game. Despite these minor shortcomings, it has to be remembered and acknowledged that this was one of the first games on the Game Boy. Its importance cannot be understated. So many games followed this formula and many fell short. There were a few, however, a blessed few, that took what Super Mario Land started, ran with it, and made wonderful things happen. These will be visited later on. For now, put this book down and play this game. You owe it to yourself because, despite its occasional ugliness, it's unfeignedly quite beautiful. Yakuman DMG-MJJ, developed by Intelligent Systems and published by Nintendo. The only launch title not to be released outside of Japan, Yakuman is the name of a particularly powerful group of hands in Japanese mahjong, analogous to something like a royal flush in poker might be. In fact, mahjong is perhaps closer to the card game Rummy, whereby you need to rely on a combination of skill, strategy, and luck to assemble the best possible hand. There are 144 tiles split into 3 sets, 3 groups of 36 suits, dots, bamboo, and number characters, 2 groups of honours, 16 wind titles that say north, south, west, and east, and 12 dragons, and 8 bonus tiles of flowers and seasons. I'm not going to attempt to ham-fistedly explain the rules of Mahjong, as it's not straightforward by any means, and is best learned by playing the game with people who already know it. Essentially, you're trying to make the best hand of 13 tiles, plus the bonus one that's dealt to all players at the start, out of tiles that you pick up one by one, discarding ones you don't want. You can go for 3 or more tile straights, 3 or 4 of the same tile, and so on. You can have some pairs in your hand, but there are limits. You're allowed either 1 pair or 7. That's it. If you can make all 14 tiles into pairs, that's fine. And you can have 1 or 0 pairs amongst your hand, but no higher than that. There are other intricacies like that you're going to have to find for yourself, as my knowledge isn't the best. I mentioned the special hands before. These are special hands that are a double-edged sword because, while extremely powerful and virtually guarantee you'll win the round, are very tricky to get before an opponent has a hand they can declare as tenpai, or ready, i.e. they've won by reaching certain conditions in their hand. You may have seen these tile sets if you ever played a version of Mahjong Solitaire, which uses the same collection of stones. Essentially, these serve the same purpose as a deck of cards do, whereby the same cards can be used to play many different games, both solo and multiplayer. In fact, you'll see the same tiles in just a couple of games' time in Shanghai. Sometimes you can get around the barrier of Japanese language games, but this is one to get a fan translation of if you're able to, as it's not super intuitive otherwise. Well, perhaps if you can learn the basic tile numbering you might be able to get around it, but the finer points of the game, such as Dora and Richi, will probably be lost on you. Even then, there's no tutorial in Yakuman as to what the rule set is, so you'll have to Google that as well. The score I've given is based on my own experience playing Mahjong when I've been lucky enough to be invited to traditional Chinese New Year celebrations. I struggled then, and I struggle now, but from what I can understand, this is a pretty good rendition of Japanese rules Mahjong. Tennis DMG-TN, developed and published by Nintendo. As early titles go, tennis is a good choice. Pong showed us that tennis is a sport that translates well to even the most rudimentary video game systems. This game, like its NES counterpart, is simple fare that concentrates on being tennis. There's not much here though. No career mode, tournaments, doubles match, not even a name entry screen. Tennis looks nice, nothing is cramped, and the sense of perspective on the court works well. It's not difficult to discern where the ball's heading. Mario's umpire calls and head movements are nice touches. The music gets old pretty quickly, although you can turn it off, the problem therein being left with a rather sparse collection of sound effects from a Space Invaders reject list. They do the job, but I certainly wouldn't bother with headphones with this one. The physics lend themselves well to an enjoyable experience. I occasionally find myself disagreeing with the hit detection, but once you learn what you can get away with, it's no big deal. There are a range of shots at your disposal. You can aim long or short, left or right quite nicely, and it's pretty responsive. The AI is surprisingly good with a range of difficulties. It's a satisfying enough game, focusing on one aspect and doing it well. More thorough game testing would have been beneficial, however. There's a strange service glitch whereby you throw the ball, swing underneath it rather than hit it, and then sidestep, letting the ball hit you on the head. You'll win the point automatically, every time. Now, I must admit to not knowing a great deal about the sport, but I don't think that's a rule. Thanks for listening to the Portable Power Podcast. If you want to support the show, the best way to do so is on Patreon at patreon.com/portablepowerpodcast. Or subscribe on the YouTubes. We have daily uploads Monday to Friday, where you can watch me suck at the games as I talk about them. You can tweet me at POCubed or on any of the other socials you might expect. Thanks again and have a great weekend.